And welcome back for another episode. So let's have a quick look at what's going on. First of all, unlike probably every other nation, we didn't get money this year. We got, instead, a nice 20,000 tons of food, which is going to more or less cover... Well, actually, it's going to cover the entire year's usage of food. With just that, and then, of course, we're also producing a lot, so our stockpile should be growing quite nicely here in Amsterdam. And of course that does mean that our wealth will probably drop to negative sometime this year. I think it's more or less unavoidable, but anyway, I think that's still pretty good that we get the resources, because those are in the end much more valuable for us, especially during the wartime. And that does mean that we could easily start expanding our refineries here in Amsterdam. We're not doing that right now, we're currently getting some research facilities, which is very good for us actually. But in terms of fleet movements, we still have the three raiding fleets in the Atlantic, 2 in the North Atlantic and 1 in South Atlantic. We'll be shuffling them around a little bit to make sure that they are being maintained and all that, but they will try to keep their stations more or less. We might actually move this a little bit closer to the jump points, but of course the gentleman rule is that no standing on top of the jump point to take advantage of the jump shock. But there's nothing about raiding enemy convoys, so that's certainly what we'll try to do. Essentially, as long as we can keep the enemy economy in a very bad situation, we should be able to recover any losses much quicker. Now, of course, we are planning on doing a joint raid with the Portuguese. We are actually allied with them right now. And basically what we have in mind is we'll gather up the fleets in our Brazil holdings to Curacao, and then once we're there, we'll do a raid on Tortuga. Repay the fate of Portugal, essentially. Now, it remains to be seen if there's going to be any French vessels there. I certainly hope that there's at least a little bit, but it's a bit hard to tell. In terms of colonies, the colony that we set up last year in Cape of Good Hope is now, well, it has a little bit of infrastructure there, not much mind you, but a little bit, and we'll be getting more. And we have sent some colony ships from Gulf of Guinea to actually transfer some population from Cape Town to the new colony, because the location itself is not bad for mining, especially bronze and rum are very good there, and sail and rigging and wood. All of which are very important for any shipbuilding and so forth, and especially, I mean, Cape Town has a lot of resources, the accessibilities are rather dreadful, especially for wood and sail, so that's going to be very useful, and rum is also rather small, so it's going to be a mining colony to support Cape Town, and hopefully it will work alright, and eventually we hope to build some shipyards in Cape Town, just so that we can first of all maintain some of the ships in around the area, and secondly build more and make sure that we control the sea routes to India, essentially. But that is about it for the start of this episode, so I'll see you in a bit. The fleet that was originally headed for Cape Town through Brazil that did complete its overhaul in Paramaribo has now arrived in Curacao to strengthen our Caribbean fleet a little bit. Of course, that wasn't only few ships, but every little helps. We have managed to complete the research and faster reloads, and now we started designing new cannons that can be actually reloaded faster. So that includes the 6-pounders, 8-pounders and 10-pounders, which will increase our firepower quite nicely. We have received news from our allies, the Brits, that a large French fleet has set sail from Tortuga towards northwest. Thus we presume that the port is currently very lightly defended, and although we were originally going to wait for some extra reinforcements to arrive here, and some Portuguese fleets to join us, what we'll do is we'll actually send in a raiding fleet already towards Tortuga. Now it's going to take a bit more than around 24 days to reach there, but it should be alright, and once we've done our strike there, we'll go back to Curacao to then take on the or get the reinforcements and attach them to the fleet, and then perhaps strike on Havana as well, though I do need to talk about that with Mordred first. Our fleet from Malacca has now joined our Ceylon fleet, and after they've had some overhaul, we'll see if we can't make a strike on the holdings that the French have in India. We are currently mere minutes away from Tortuga, and once we are within range, we'll start firing upon the coastal defences. After that, we'll destroy the shipyards, and then we'll get away from here before the French send any reinforcements. We are now well within the reach of our cannons, and the brigs have started hammering the shipyards, while the rest of the ships are trying to destroy the fortifications. So far, only one of our ships has been hit, although it has already taken a decent bit of damage to the armor, but the armor is holding so far. The ship that the enemy has been firing on has taken quite significant damage now. They have managed to penetrate the armor in its entirety, so we'll be pulling this particular ship back already. And hopefully it can escape the coastal fortifications before anything important gets destroyed. Another one of our ships has taken quite heavy damage, so we'll be detaching it from the fleet and sending it back to Curacao to be repaired. One thing that I did notice though is that the planet, or rather the port of Portugal, is considered subtropical mountains, meaning that it is rather difficult to hit the fortifications, which, to be fair, it's going to make this a lot harder than what it should normally be. But I'm sure that we can destroy them. I mean, we've done a decent bit of, or at least some damage on the shipyards already, and then of course we've destroyed some of the cannons. We don't know the exact numbers, but we have certainly destroyed a fair bit. Another one of our ships has taken already a decent bit of damage, but right now we'd estimate that about half of the enemy cannons have been destroyed in the coastal fortifications. That's I don't think they'll be able to destroy, or they might be just able to penetrate the armor on this ship, but on other ships, probably not going to be an issue. There's only a handful of guns firing from the fortifications, so we'll start focusing our fire on the shipyards now. We will of course make sure that nothing of the fortifications are left standing, but at this point our fleet is large enough that we don't need to focus fire on them with every ship. Our raid on Tortuga was a great success, although 2 of our ships are, well, technically 3 of our ships are in need of heavy repairs. Of course, to fool the enemy a little bit, we'll head towards the mining colony that the French have here, and once we are about halfway there, then we'll divert our course towards Curacao, and of course the 2 ships that are already sailing towards Curacao will continue doing so. The raiding fleets have now returned back to Curacao. Of course, the damaged ships will undergo some overhaul, and we are still waiting for some reinforcements, especially the Portuguese reinforcements, to arrive here before we do anything else over here. I mean, we could of course strike on Havana as well, and effectively neutralize both the enemy ports in the region. After that, we could potentially go either to the Gulf of Mexico or something else, but that is something that needs to be talked about a bit further detail. We have completed a run of construction factories and mines in Amsterdam, so now we started building more mines, financial centers, and construction factories, as well as some infrastructure so that we can colonize places that are not quite easy to colonize, but still have a nice amount of resources that we might require. We have heard news of the disaster at Philadelphia, so we sent our Caribbean fleet to intercept any fleets trying to return to the Caribbean. Hopefully we can get there in time. It's going to take about 50 days for us to reach there, so that might be an issue. But the idea is to try to take out any enemy fleets trying to return to repairs before they manage to repair, so they're still weak. And considering that this fleet is, I think, 69 ships. Yeah, 69 ships, so that's pretty decent size. Of course, what we heard from the British is that there's still about 100 ships left from the invading fleet, but it is very unlikely that they are going to be moving together at this point, so we should be able to take out one or the other of the fleets. Also, we've sent a blockade fleet to the North Atlantic, or heading to North Atlantic from Amsterdam, which will be blockading the Bay of Biscay entry from any
potential French vessels trying to return to Europe. And I believe the Portuguese will be doing the same for Gulf of Cadiz, which should help a fair bit.
We have now completed designing the new tier of cannons, which is going to be very useful in our future ships. We'll also reorganize a little bit of our research, so we are now researching the thicker armor in Amsterdam instead of Curacao, and we are also managed to complete the research on better accuracy in moving targets, which we've already started then designing new fire controls for our ships, which again will lower the size that we need for our fire controls, plus also increases our range a little bit. While the improvement might not be huge, it will certainly help a little bit. And once we get the thicker armor, probably at the start of next year more or less, we should be able to then finalize the designs that we've been working on the rates 1 through 3. We have also done a fair bit of redesigning of the frigates and brigs and sloops. We've also assigned the new cannons to the smaller ships as well. There's still a little bit of optimization that can probably be done here. But in any case, the rate of fire will now be doubled from the before. The 6th and 7th rates will basically have the 6-pounder cannon still, then 5th and 4th rates will have the 8-pounders with faster reload. I mean, these will also have the faster reload, and then the rates 3 to 1 will have the 10-pounder cannons, which does force us to have a little bit less cannons, but as soon as we get the thicker armor, then we'll be able to get a little bit more tonnage out of the armor with the same protection value, and that does mean that we'll be able to fit in probably at least one more extra set of cannons here, for example the 3rd rates, which will improve the firepower quite nicely, plus the damage output will be good, and it will still fire faster than the old 8-pounders did, so it's all good. Our Caribbean fleet has now arrived in an ambush position of any enemy fleets heading south from the Philadelphia raid. We completed research on more effective fuel storing. Of course, that will not take effect until we get better sails. But we are moving towards that since we are getting the next gunpowder upgrade. And that's going to be done early next year, after which we can then start getting the next tier of sails. We have completed designing the new fire controls, and we started researching some better sensor sensitivities just so that we can then increase our spotting range a little bit. Of course, that will also require the active ground sensor strength 12, but that will be researched in about a year. It would appear that we spotted some French support vessels heading to American East Coast here in Caribbean. So what we're going to do is, because I'm assuming that the enemy fleet that raided Philadelphia is currently still stranded somewhere out of fuel, or more or less out of fuel somewhere in the region. What we're going to do is we're going to follow that fleet. We're in a safe distance so that they should not be able to spot us. And then what we'll do is we'll follow that fleet far enough so that we can catch up with it, but they will not see us. And once we have eyes on the enemy fleet there, we'll use some of our smaller ships to sink that support vessel fleet, which seems to be only 4 ships, so it shouldn't take too long. I'm pretty sure that we can do that in a matter of minutes, as long as we're not too far away. And concerning our ships in this fleet, I do believe we got some of the fastest ship designs, although I'm not entirely sure. I'm pretty sure that at least the 6th rates are rather quick. They are a decent bit faster than the enemy support vessels, so we should be able to use these to catch up with the enemy support vessels, sink them, and then use these 6th rates to hopefully provoke the enemy fleet to come after us. And then we'll regroup with the primary fleet, and then we'll destroy whatever fleet, or we can use our speed for our advantage and take the enemy ships out if need be.
We have been shadowing the enemy supply ships, and we have located the enemy fleet now, and it would appear that they are sending in a fleet to intercept our brigs here. Now, we are only using the brigs as a bait. There's only 9 of them right now, but they are rather quick. So what we are going to do, we're currently going at 1100 kilometers per second, and we are trying to catch up with the supply ships. If we can, we'll try to sink them. If not, then we'll get fairly close to the enemy fleet and then turn around and try to lead them towards Caribbean, while this main fleet here is gonna step aside to the waypoint here. Once the fleets are passed, then it will start following the enemy fleet, and hopefully we'll catch up with them, and once we get close enough we'll strike with both of the ships, preferably simultaneously, and then hopefully we can sink as many of the enemy ships as possible. We know that they are damaged, so we should have the advantage there, and we know that our ships can go faster than the 937 that the enemy ships are going to be going for the most part. So hopefully this goes well and the bait works, but we'll see. It would seem that the support vessels are going to get away, but we'll first let them get past the actual fleet that is coming after us, which is quite a sizable fleet actually. But we're going to trust that they are well damaged. So once we start fighting them, we should be able to sink quite a few of them, and if we can't sink all of them, then our ships should still be faster and undamaged. Well, at least currently undamaged, so we should be able to sink quite a few of them and, if need be, run away without the enemies catching us. But we'll get fairly close to the enemies first before we turn around, just to get enough time for this fleet to get out of the way. And then we might fiddle around with our speed here a little bit, just to make sure that the enemy gets within reasonable range, but that they can't catch us. So that we won't be taking fire along the way, because they probably have chaser cannons, we do not. So we need to keep at least probably 80,000 kilometers distance or something like that, which is a decent distance. Although, if they do get closer than that, they will be able to start firing, and the brigs won't be able to hold all that much damage, I'm afraid. Right, the enemy is about 500,000 kilometers away now, so we will turn about, and we've devised a plan. We'll use some clever waypoints here to make sure that the enemy can cut corners a little bit and try to keep up, but not too much that is going to be a huge problem. So we'll be going around here, and all the way there if need be. At that point we should have the proper fleet coming from behind the enemies. We have now dragged the pursuing enemy fleet far enough that we cannot actually see the remaining ships over there. They should be somewhere around there, but we cannot see them right now. However, the enemy ships over here are still pursuing, and if my calculations are correct, we might just get far enough with the main fleet here that they should be beyond the enemy sensor ranges, although I'm not entirely sure about that. We have now gone past the first waypoint, and hopefully the Caribbean fleet will be far enough from the waypoint 3, so that once the enemy reaches there, we will not be spotted. If we can drag the enemy beyond the waypoint 3, then we can already start going after them with the main fleet, and try to cut them off from the tankers somewhere around it. Actually, we should be able to see the tankers still over there. Well, at least that's where they were. I don't think they've managed to leave from there quite yet. The enemy has followed us past the waypoint 3, so it's now time to turn around with the main fleet and start following. It's probably going to take a while before we catch up with them, but in the meanwhile we'll make sure that the bait doesn't get too far away. I mean, there is 4 million kilometer, more than that actually, distance between the bait and the enemy fleet, but it's going to take a while for us to catch up, so it's probably going to be somewhere around here when the battle actually starts. And hopefully that is way too far away for the enemy ships to actually do anything. It would appear that we've been spotted, so the enemy has changed their course, but at this point I am pretty sure that we can intercept them before they can reach the other set of fleets. Now we'll move in the bait to combine forces with the actual fleet, so that they can help in the battle a bit more effectively. The enemy seems to be sending in a second fleet, the ships that were left with the tankers. Now the enemy does have a lot more ships, but what we can do is we can strike on them, and if we start getting damaged we can pull back from the battle, and hopefully we can sink as many ships as possible. Then we can potentially go after them again and do the strikes over and over until we can sink their navy, unless we start taking too heavy damage that we need to retreat. But as long as we can keep the speed advantage, which we currently do have, then we should be fine in this battle. The enemy moves in to attack our fleet. Now they do have a lot more ships there, but we can still run away if things start looking bad, and we hope to sink at least some of the enemy ships there. The enemy ships are almost within our reach, and soon we shall see if we can sink them or not. And so it begins. Although they did hit us more than we hit them, we did get one penetrative hit already. We moved in a little bit closer and managed to fire a nice salvo on the enemy. We managed to demast 2 of the enemy ships. Unfortunately there were only 5th rates, but there are still 2 ships that will probably not be participating in this fight, and we'll try to kite these main fleet around a little bit further. We're trying to keep about 35,000 kilometer range, just so that the smaller cannons can fire, but at the same time we're not too close to take a huge amount of damage, at which point they can easily chip away our armor and potentially win the battle. So for our advantage it works better if we just manage to do small hits through the armor, because there are huge gaps in the armor. So just shoot through there, destroy components, maybe explode a few components and so forth. We can do a lot more damage that way than what they can do on our armor. We exchanged another huge salvo. We did take quite a bit of damage on our ships, although still so far only 1 or 2 layers of armor have been penetrated on most ships. There's 2 or 3 ships that have had 3 layers of armor just about penetrated. But there's still plenty of armor left to tank the damage from the enemies, whereas we managed to demast quite a few of the enemy ships. And there's a huge amount of damage there, so with this speed the enemy will run out of ships soon enough. After another massive broadside has been exchanged here, another few of the enemy ships have been demasted. Unfortunately we have started taking a fair bit of damage now, so we'll try to take up a little bit distance, and we're hoping that since a lot of the enemy ships are now stranded for a while, we can maybe maneuver around this main battle fleet here, or at least get them split their fleet a little bit more, and then it's going to be easier for us. We do have the speed advantage, so we can get at least far enough so that the smaller cannons cannot hit us. Another broadside. We've been doing a decent bit of damage on their ships overall, and I think we just demasted another few. We are taking heavy damage here, but so far we haven't taken any component damage, and we are starting to get a little bit further and further away from them, which means that hitting is going to be a little bit harder. Now of course it may hurt us a little bit more sooner rather than later, because we have a bit smaller ships on average, so we have a little bit smaller range, so it means that we are going to have a bit harder time hitting them. But so far, if this keeps going on, I mean there's a lot of ships here that we can then go in. If we can get rid of this fleet one way or another, then we should be able to go around and take out these smaller fleets one by one without taking too much damage. Another broadside, and this time they did manage to do some decent damage on us. One of our 4th rays and one of our 6th rays have been demasted. They should be able to move still, but at this point I think what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to get close and destroy as many of these ships as possible to buy some time for these 2 to get away, and then try to get away with the main fleet as well. But one strike at the close quarters and then move away, and with that we may have done enough damage to either force them to turn back, in which case we can follow them a little bit and try to take out some of the smaller fleets here, with perhaps our faster ships or something like that, or we can wait until we've repaired all of our damage, move in to do a bit of a strike, and then pull back again and so forth, just to whittle them down bit by bit. But these 2 ships that have been damaged or demasted now will keep on going towards Caribbean, or at least further south, to get out of the battle and be able to repair at their own leisure. Now that we turned in to fire upon the enemy once again, we did amazing damage, and we sank 6 of the enemy ships. They seem to all be just 5th rate, so it's not that huge loss for them, but losing 6 ships is gonna have to hurt a fair bit, so I have a feeling that the enemy is not gonna stand here for long. And I think at this point it might be in our advantage to keep on pushing. If we keep this close distance, we can probably destroy more of their ships right now. Of course that means that we'll take a lot of damage as well. But we still have 67 ships in this fleet. Whereas the enemy ships are going down, they probably have about the same amount of ships total right now, or actually a bit less. Especially since a lot of the ships have been spread out over here. So we should be able to take out the main fleet and then pick out the smaller fleets here. I think this was the turn of the battle there.
After a salvo near point blank, we have sunk another few of the enemy ships, so there's about a dozen of the enemy ships now sinking. However, we have taken quite serious damage here now as well, so I think at this point it's time for us to vacate the area. I think the fact that we didn't lose actually any ships so far, at least, if we can escape with all of these, then we should be able to call it quite a nice victory. We dealt a huge amount of damage on the enemy, we've delayed them a fair bit, and secondly, we have sank a dozen of their ships. This is going to take a while for the French to be able to rebuild those ships, especially to bring them to America, since we destroyed the shipyards in Portugal. We managed to score another 7 kills, and now we are off. We will not tarry here longer. I think we've taken plenty of damage, we've weakened the enemy a fair bit, at least we killed a lot of their frigates here. I don't think we have actually destroyed anything else than frigates so far, but we have done a quite decent amount of damage, and I'd say that's good enough. The enemy still managed to fire one more broadside on us. Unfortunately, it did hit some of the already damaged ships quite badly by the looks of it, but no new demastings over here in the main fleet, and we did manage to move far enough so that they wouldn't be doing as high damage as what we did on them. And we did of course return the fire and did do a fair bit of damage on them as well, but probably not quite as much. And it would appear that we did actually sink one more of their frigates. We are slowly but surely leaving out of the range of the enemy ships. We did recruit most of the ships. One of the second race that we had got totally demasted and it's now stranded. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave that one behind. It may take a bit too long for it to be repaired, and we cannot really tow it right now. And we don't want to stay too much longer here. I mean, we've sank a lot of the enemy ships here. So if we lose one ship, I think that's a fair trade. Like, the amount of frigates that they've lost is quite insane, really. Unfortunately, we didn't manage to sink any of their ships as a line, but I think majority of their frigates have now been sunk. I mean, they still got 15 fourth rates. And then they got 13 third rates, 8 second rates, and 2 first rates. So it's still quite formidable strength navy there. But at this point I think it's time to just leave. These two ships are already pretty far away. And the main fleet is slowly but surely getting away. It's going to take a while before we can actually get to full speed. And currently we're going very slow just to make sure that all the ships are moving together. Or at least as many of them as possible. And we have managed to sink... Yeah, we've managed to sink quite a few of their ships. So I think this is quite a resounding victory. It is now more than 2 days after the battle, and we are heading back to Caribbean. Of course, some of our ships did get hit pretty bad and lost majority of their rations, so we will probably not be able to reach Caribbean quite entirely, but we do have some 4 support vessels coming in from Caribbean. It's going to take about 2 months for them to reach here, but we'll try to get as far as possible. And then what we'll do is we'll refuel those ships, and only those ships that need badly refueling. But the rest of the ships can then keep on going already, and we'll make our way back to Curacao and start repairing the ships, because the majority of the fleet now does require repairs. There's now several ships out of rations here in American East Coast, so we do have to wait until our support vessels arrive, and they are still pretty far away from reaching us, so yeah, those ships are not going to reach home until sometime next year. And there we have it, that's a year. So we did have a pretty good year all in all. I mean, we achieved a nice victory over the French fleet over here in American East Coast. I believe actually if we have a look at the wrecks we can see it was over there for the most part. And we did also conduct a raid of Tortuga, destroying the coastal defenders and shipyards there. Now, we were hoping to do a raid of Havana as well, but the opportunity to fight the French fleet over here was just too good to pass. And the fleets over here are returning. I mean, this fleet is already moving, and these ships are going to be moving soon. Just refueling a little bit, and then they'll grab the escort the support vessels back to Curacao. Now, we're going to have to do a fair bit of repairs there, which is why we are no longer starting new ship builds there exactly. There's still 2 ships being built there, but they will probably be finished before the fleets arrive there, or at least shortly after they arrive there. So we should be able to repair the fleets relatively quickly. In Amsterdam, we are building a fair bit of ships. We haven't started building the second trades quite yet. We are waiting for a bit of research to be done, mostly the high-density uranium armor, before we start doing that, because that is going to give us a lot more room to work with. And speaking of research, we are getting the research rate, better gunpowder, thicker armor, active ground sensor strength 12, so better spotting and EM sensor sensitivity. These two together will allow us to get the better crow's nest, which will allow us to spot further away. And one thing that we did spot or notice in the battle against the French in American East Coast is that the enemy could not spot our bricks before we spotted them with our bricks, so that is something that can be very useful. They are smaller than the sensor resolution, so yeah, they can be easily used as a quick scout, and honestly, in that battle the bricks performed rather well. They baited the enemy rather well indeed. In terms of buildings, there's nothing out of the ordinary. We're still building some research facilities, then we're building some fishing fleets and orbital miners and so forth. At some point we hope to start building a naval shipyard in Cape Town, as well as one in probably Colombo, because I took a look at the minerals that are being produced in that region. We could potentially start combining some of these resources into Colombo and then start building shipyard and all sort of stuff in there, because it has a decent population and we can certainly utilize that population and start building more ships and start such, because our operations in the east are currently a bit on the hold because we don't have the vertical gun controls there, so raiding is a bit of a moot point. We'll be firing into the planet itself and barely doing any damage, so yeah, that's not really what we want. We did open the colony in Cape of Good Hope this year. It's very small still, we don't really have a lot of colony ships around here yet, but we'll get that sorted out eventually, and we'll get this one providing minerals to Cape Town. And while Cape Town does produce everything in terms of minerals, a lot of the production values are rather low, so this should be helping a lot, especially in the rum and prawns, and I guess wood? Yeah, wood as well. So yeah, it's going to be very good as a complement for Cape Town. Then there's another civilian mining colony in Caribbean. This time it's closer to Panama actually, and it does produce a decent bit of minerals, and we are buying the minerals by the way, but we are not yet ferrying them around. Hopefully if and when we've surveyed a bit more of Panama, we can then start ferrying these minerals into a colony there, which will boost the starting economy a little bit there. Speaking of exploration, we haven't actually done all that much surveying. I mean, the ships have been surveying a little bit still, but quite a few of the ships have now had to go back for overhaul and all that, and have run out of fuel and so forth, so we had to rescue them and such. So clearly it is not a priority right now. In terms of fleet movements, other than the ships returning to Curacao, we do have our blockade fleet here in North Atlantic, which has been watching the Bay of Biscay entrance for a while now, but we might want to send that one back to Amsterdam soon, because what we've heard from the Brits is that the French are most likely sending them to Quebec. I mean, technically, if we combine this fleet, which isn't a small fleet to say the least, with the fleet in Curacao, we might be able to raid Quebec, although it is very risky, so I'd rather not do that, and I think we need to leave a fair chunk of troops here in Amsterdam, just so that we can help the British in case the enemy is trying to raid London. In terms of minerals, we are producing a fair bit of most things. There's a few minerals that we are almost making 1,000 per year, which is not bad, in profit that is. Of course, food is the smallest one that we make profit of, but that is because a lot of it is used in fuel making. And of course, in terms of actual wealth, we do have a decent wealth annually, and we are going to get about half of that due to our trade deals in the start of next episode, so we'll have a decent chunk of cash, and we've also stopped producing a fair bit of the maintenance supplies now in a lot of ports, so that should drop probably by at least 1,000, which means that we'll be making about 900 profit per month, which means that we'll be rolling into cash again. We don't need to worry about that probably for the rest of the game. Oh, it's a bit hard to tell. It might be that we will run out of cash at some point, but for the foreseeable future, it should not really be a problem. Now, in terms of shipping lines, we got one that has 2 colony ships and 1 freighter, and another one that has 1 freighter. So all in all, we got 2 colony ships and 2 freighters, which is not bad. I mean, they're not having a huge profit. Well, I mean, this had 80 profit last year, which isn't that bad. And then this one actually didn't do anything yet. It is currently on the move, and they still have a lot of wealth, so they'll probably get another ship next year, which is going to help boost their income at least a little bit, or at least get it kickstarted, I suppose. But all in all, this was a pretty good year for us. I mean, we achieved a victory over the French in Tortuga and another victory over the French here in East Coast, avenging the British fleet lost in Philadelphia. At least to some degree. I mean, what we've heard, the British lost about 100 ships, and we sank 21 ships from the French. So it's not quite even trade. But it's probably going to be crippled for a while, so once we repaired our Caribbean fleet, we might go and do a raid of Havana as well, just to neutralize any enemy threats in Caribbean. Of course, we'll try to keep the commerce raiding going as much as we can, but we do need to be a bit careful with our fleet usage right now. We don't want to spread out too much. But that is about it for this episode, so make sure to check out Mordred's channels, the links are down below in the description. But other than that, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, bye bye.